What's up, guys? Neil Orfield here to show you how I will be setting up my fantasy cruncher for tonight's single game slate between the Falcons and the Panthers. This is for FanDuel, and I'll be setting up for the largest field GPP on FanDuel. There are some steps I'll be taking here that I wouldn't be taking if I were playing cash games or small field GPPs, things like leaving salary on the table. I'm doing for the purpose of making unique lineups, which you don't necessarily need to worry about in a smaller field GPP or a cash game setting. So keep that in mind. But this is for the large field GPPs. All right, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to this MVP tab, and I'm going to set a max cap. Actually, first I'm going to go to my columns, go to my quick view, and rearrange these columns here. I have a quick view saved that'll show me my exposure cap, my projection, how much I get of each player, ownership projection, etc., right in the center of my screen. So now I'm going to, in the MVP tab, set a max cap, exposure cap on every player at MVP specifically of 20%. All right, now I'm going to go into advanced options, which is where I do most of my work. And within advanced options, two tabs primarily, actually two tabs exclusively. The general tab and the groups tab are the tabs I'll be using. Starting in the general tab, unique players per lineup. The default is set to one unique player per lineup. So that means I could have just one player different across my lineups. I'm okay with that playing 150 lineups. If you're playing 20 or fewer lineups, I might suggest changing this to two unique players per lineup just for a little bit of diversification of your portfolio. But across 150, I'm going to leave it at one unique player per lineup. Team salary cap, I'm not going to set a minimum salary. I will set a maximum salary again, just for the purpose of avoiding the most duplicated lineups. I don't want my lineups to be duplicated 100 times, 200 times, 300 times, where even if I win, I'm not winning a significant amount of money. I would rather win a lot of money when I do get lucky enough to win. So I'm going to try to avoid duplication. And the easiest way to do so is to leave a little bit of salary on the table. So instead of using the full $60,000 salary allowed on FanDuel, I'm going to set a cap of $58,500, leaving $1,500 on the table again to avoid some of those most duplicated lineups. Offensive players versus defense. The max is set to 2 players. I'm going to change this to 4 players. So I could have 4 players from one team against just the defense of the other team. We just saw a lineup with that configuration win a couple weeks ago in the Bengals-Browns game. The only Bengals player who made it into the optimal lineup on FanDuel was the defense. So I'm going to allow for that again. Global exposure cap, I'm going to leave this at 100%. I did already set a cap on the MVP position in particular, but the other position in flex, I'm okay with getting to potentially 100% of certain players, and I'll adjust if I'm getting to too much of certain players. Randomness, I'm going to set to 50% using normal distribution randomness. If you're using classic randomness, I might recommend 30 or 40%, something a little bit lower. And if you want a little bit more control over your lineups, I would use a lower number here in the randomness. I've thought about actually changing mine a little bit lower just because I do like to have some control over my player exposures. But for now, I'm going to leave it at 50% because it's been working. Minimum projection included in calculation. The default is set to 3. I'm probably going to leave that at 3. On FanDuel, I'm probably not going to be, even if I set a player's projection to 3 fantasy points. So say I have a player who currently projects for 2 fantasy points. I'm going to raise their projection to at least 3 if I want them to be included in my player pool. And, on FanDuel, I don't think I'm going to be getting to too much of any player with a projection of 3 anyway. So not a huge concern there. All right, so I'm going to leave that at 3. Players from each team max again. I don't mind having 4 players from one team against 1 from the opposing team. You see that win quite a bit. So I'm going to leave that there and move on to the groups tab. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. 0 risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. And groups, primarily, I'm concerned about the quarterback position because on plays in which the quarterback is throwing the ball, they are typically, or always, if the quarterback is throwing the ball, they are not going to be the highest scoring player on that play. Whoever the receiver is going to get more half point per reception plus more points per yard and for the touchdown than the quarterback. So you need to be a little bit more cognizant of your correlations with the quarterback than other positions. So I'm going to start by making a couple related groups. First will be a Mariota MVP group. So I'm going to find, here's Marcus Mariota in the MVP spot, make him my key player. So this entire group only related to lineups that have Mariota in the MVP spot. Now I'm going to add Falcons pass catchers to the secondary group here. And I'm really just going through, adding everybody with the Falcons logo and a projection. At this point in the day, I'm not really worried about getting to players who might be inactive later. If they are inactive later, their projection is going to change to 0. Doesn't hurt me to have them in this group anyway. So I'm just being pretty liberal and adding every player with a projection for the Falcons among pass catchers. Whether you want to include running backs, honestly, it's questionable today. None of the running backs for the Falcons have been very involved in the passing game this year with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. I'm hesitant to not include Cordarrelle Patterson just because of his history as a wide receiver. I think that it wouldn't be surprising to see him added, to see them change the game plan a little bit and use Cordarrelle Patterson a little bit more as a receiver. So I think I am going to include him in this group. I think I'm not going to include the other running backs for the Falcons just because none of them have been all that involved in the passing game. And also because for this particular group, I'm not going to require any of these players. With Marcus Mariota, he does have rushing upside. He's rushed for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns this year. So he can certainly be the optimal MVP without bringing along a pass catcher. However, I'm going to say only apply plus minus adjustment. So I'm not requiring any pass catchers. However, I'm going to be giving boosts to Falcons pass catchers to make it more likely that in lineups that have Mariota at MVP, I do get at least 1 or 2 pass catchers for the Falcons. Because in general, I think that is, I'd prefer to have a pass catcher from the Falcons in a lineup that has Mariota at MVP. I think it's certainly likely that if Mariota puts up enough fantasy points to be the optimal MVP, he's probably thrown for at least 1 touchdown and brought at least 1 Falcons pass catcher along with him. Maybe not in this. This could be a very low scoring game, so maybe he doesn't need to throw for a touchdown. Maybe he just rushes for a touchdown and not necessarily the case. But I think in general, it's more likely that he brings somebody along with him. Cordarrelle Patterson with this projection, maybe don't give him the full boost. Maybe I'll just give him a smaller boost because with this projection and also the fact that he just has not been that involved in the passing game, there's not as strong of a correlation. So I'm giving a little bit of a lesser boost to Cordarrelle Patterson here. All right, secondary group is going to be a PJ Walker MVP group. And PJ Walker is a very different type of quarterback than Mariota. He has rushed for 25 total rushing yards so far this year. So definitely want at least 1 pass catcher in lineups that have PJ Walker in the MVP spot. So I'm going to go and add Walker MVP as my key player. And now I'm going to add all of these Panthers pass catchers into my secondary group, starting with DJ Moore, Laviska, Terrace Marshall, Shi Smith, Ian Thomas, Ricci, Trimble. And again, none of these running backs have been all that involved. Of course, it hasn't been that long since they traded Christian McCaffrey. So maybe, as these guys are being used as backup running backs, it wasn't in situations where they wanted to be throwing the ball. So maybe they'll get more involved. So far, we just haven't seen Deontay Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, any of these guys all that involved in the passing game. I'm hesitant. I think I'm probably just going to leave them out once again. Maybe because I'm requiring when I could. No, I think I'm just going to leave them out because these guys are probably more likely to make it into lineups anyway, given the projection here for Foreman. Yeah, I'm going to leave out the running backs. It is debatable. You could certainly include them. And again, for Philip Walker, because he doesn't have the same rushing upside as Mariota, I'm not going to click this button. I am going to require at least 1 player from this group in lineups that have Philip Walker at MVP. I'm also going to give boost to the pass catchers in those lineups to make it more likely that I get to multiple. So I'm going to require at least 1, and then I'm going to try and make it more likely that I get multiple when I have Philip Walker at MVP. Again, the reason being, if he's at MVP, it means he's put up a lot of fantasy points. If he's put up a lot of fantasy points, that means he's thrown for many yards and multiple touchdowns, most likely. And on every passing play, again, Philip Walker is being outscored by his receiver. And of course, if the same receiver is scoring every receiving touchdown, they're probably going to outscore Philip Walker just because of the scoring dynamics on both sites. So I'd rather have multiple receivers when I have Philip Walker at MVP. So I'm giving the boost and just requiring one. If I were playing, again, if I were making 20 or fewer lineups, I would probably actually change this. I wouldn't even give boost if I were making 20 or fewer lineups. I would just say, if any key player used, use at least 2 players from this group, just because it is so unlikely for Philip Walker, or it is, it's less likely that he gets there as the optimal MVP without bringing along multiple pass catchers. All right, the final group that I think that you kind of have to make here, not necessarily because it's FanDuel and it is half point PPR, but I think I'm going to make a group that says Walker at flex also requires at least one pass catcher. So I'm going to go and I'm going to find PJ Walker in the flex, add him as my key player, and then go ahead and add all of these Panthers pass catchers to a second group. And here, because I have PJ Walker in the flex, I can also add all of these pass catchers at the MVP spot. So I'll add DJ Moore. And here we don't even really have to worry about here. I'm just going to sort by projection. Guys who are lower projected, you don't really even need to include on FanDuel because they're just not going to be in the MVP spot. So I'll add Terrace Marshall. Shi Smith probably not making it in there. Tommy Tremble, that's probably as low as I'll go. Don't need to worry about anybody else. I think that is good enough. I think I've got all of the players that I like to include in this group. And for here, I'm not even going to give any boosts or anything because Philip Walker is in the flex spot. I think he can certainly be there with just one pass catcher elsewhere in the lineup. So I'm just going to say require at least one and leave it at that with Philip Walker. Not going to make the same group for Mariota, again, just because he has that rushing upside. I think that he has the potential to put up enough fantasy points to make it in as optimal in the flex spot without bringing along any pass catchers because of the rushing upside. So I'm not going to require it. I'm just going to see what this gives me. If I see too many lineups that have Marcus Mariota in the flex with no Falcons, or Marcus Mariota anywhere in the lineup with no Falcons elsewhere, no Falcons pass catchers, then I might adjust the groups a little bit. For now, I'm going to go through. I'm going to change this, use my projections, crunch out 150. All right, so right away we see Mariota with Kyle Pitts and Cordero Patterson. Here we have Mariota with no Falcons pass catchers in the lineup. Again, I don't want to see a ton of that. I'm okay with it a little bit. Here, Mariota MVP with Pitts and Cordero Patterson. Don't mind that. Mariota with multiple pass catchers if you include Patterson. Like to see that. Mariota with Pitts. Mariota with Pitts. Mariota with Pitts. In general, I'm fine with these lineups. These all look like lineups that have at least potential to be optimal. All right, so this lineup, we have Koo being the highest scoring player on the slate, outscoring Mariota, Moore, Foreman, Pinheiro. It's tough. It's tough to envision it, but I think that it is at least within the realm of possibility. Marcus Mariota, again, 50 rushing yards, does just enough to get into the into field goal range, and then Koo scores all the points. I think it's viable. Philip Walker at MVP, we require just one. And then we got Deontay Foreman as well. It's a little bit thin, but I could see Foreman becoming more involved in the passing game. So I don't mind this, kind of has two at least theoretical pass catchers. So I think that's okay. Mariota with 2 primary pass catchers plus Patterson. In general, I don't think I hate any of these lineups. And I'm also going to check out in the MVP spot when I have Philip Walker at MVP. What do these look like? I only required 1. Getting 2 here, getting 2 if you include Foreman here, 2 here, 2 if you include Foreman, just 1 here, I think he could, obviously fall into the end zone for a touchdown, a rushing touchdown. He could at least, break off a 20. There are ways for him to score. Like, he's not any quarterback, I think, has at least a little bit of rushing upside. So I think I'm okay with just one. Again, if I see it too much here, we see it again. I'd rather see multiple pass catchers. So I could consider going back and give bigger boosts to uh, Panthers pass catchers when I have Philip Walker at MVP. I could consider doing that to try to get more frequently have multiple pass catchers when I have Walker at MVP. But in general, I think this looks good. Now I'm seeing a number of Mariota in the flex without any other pass catchers. So let's take a look at those. Scrolling up to the top here. Mariota, okay, multiple here. No pass catchers here, just the kicker. Multiple, that's good. Got Pitts, just the kicker. Pass catchers, Pitts, Patterson, just the kicker, nobody. For the most part, most of my Mariota lineups are coming in with at least one pass catcher. I'm seeing kind of a bit, maybe more than I'd like, with Mariota with just the kicker or with no Falcons pass catchers in the flex. Again, I think it's viable, so I don't want to require that I have a Falcons pass catcher in there when I have Mariota in the flex. But I would consider going back now and making a new group that, put Mariota in the flex as my key player, and then add all the Falcons pass catchers and just give a boost to those pass catchers, not require them. Click that box that says, just use plus minus adjustments, and then give boosts of like 6 to 8%, just to make it a little bit more likely that I don't run into, 30 of these types of lineups across my set. I'd rather have, something in the 10 range maybe of Mariota in the flex with no pass catchers. I might be okay with 10. I don't think I'd be okay with 25, 30. So maybe I'd go back if I see too many and create a group that gives a boost to Falcons pass catchers when I have Mariota in the flex. I'm not going to go through that process right now. I'm just kind of trying to show you the way I think about it and my general approach. So in general, these lineups they all look plausible, even if I'm getting a little bit more of that construction than I'd like. Guys, we have a great offer for new users only. You can get full access to everything Stokastic has to offer for NFL for 3 days free. Projections, ownership, 1v1 tools, lineup generator, top stacks tool, all free. Zero risk. Sign up now. The link is in the description of this video. Note that Fantasy Cruncher is an add-on and is not included in this offer. And then the second thing I do, so I check to see, do my lineups look like they're correlated well enough that they could feasibly win? And then I go through position by position and I check if I'm getting exposure levels that I like to different players. And I can see right away, I don't think I'm happy with 7% Philip Walker. I think that he's certainly more viable than that. So I'm going to give him a projection boost here. If you are new to Fantasy Cruncher, I typically recommend giving thumbs up or thumbs down. I have a good amount of experience, so I have an idea about about how much I want to give a boost to get about where I want to be. And again, trial and error. I crunch several times until I get to exposure levels that I like sometimes. So this is, not an exact science. I'm just kind of eyeballing what am I going to need to change this projection to get to approximately how much I want. I can see here I'm getting to a good amount of Foreman, good amount of Patterson, a little bit less there than Foreman, but not getting to a lot of Algier, getting to a little bit more Hubbard. Now, what do I think I want to do here? If Hubbard projects for 20%, Algier just 10%, mine are more in line with that. Maybe I want more Algier. Maybe I think that Algier is actually more viable or just as viable as Hubbard. So then maybe because they are the same salary, I'll give them the same projection. I'll give them just both a little bit of a boost. So I'm going to bring Algier up to 8, Hubbard up to 8. Huntley, do I want Huntley in my lineups? Again, the purpose of this video is not for actually making player decisions. So I'll be writing an article this afternoon, doing a bit more research and then making decisions after that. So I don't really want to make any player decisions here. But if I decide later, you know what, 3.7% Caleb Huntley is a little bit too much, then I would certainly give a little bit of a boost here to make sure that I get more than that 3.7%. Oftentimes I like these guys on FanDuel who have some opportunity and don't get much ownership. So there's a good chance I'm going to try and get over this number, but it's going to depend on after I look at his snap counts, his routes run, et cetera, before I decide how much I actually want. Same thing, Raheem Blackshear. Maybe I want some. we'll see later. I'm going to make that decision after doing a bit more research. And I will be, as I said, I'll be publishing an article later on today for Stokastic. It'll be on the Stokastic NFL page. If I think of it, I'll also post it under these videos this afternoon, but have to check back for that because I still have to finish writing that article. All right, Drake London, maybe I want more than 11%, give him a little bit of a boost. Shy Smith, there's an example of a guy that I think I'd like to, if he's coming in at 7% at 6,000, I like seeing that I'm getting to 24% currently. I should sort by salary here. So glad to see that. If this number comes down, since I've adjusted other projections, maybe I'd boost him back up. For now, I'll leave that. Demir Bird, another guy, getting 0 right now. Projects for just 3.9% ownership. Laviska Schultz, 1.1%. I suspect that these are guys that I'm going to want to be getting over the field. Again, not because they necessarily have the likelihood of large volume, but because these are the kind of guys who they're getting 0 ownership because the price tag is too high for their volume. But on FanDuel, it's easier for a player to score 1 touchdown and be optimal than it is on DraftKings. On DraftKings, generally, volume matters more because it is full point per reception. You get bonuses if you reach 100 yards, et cetera, et cetera. So it's kind of harder for guys who just have like 1 splash play to outscore those guys on DraftKings. On FanDuel, because it's half point per reception, it's a little bit more viable for a guy who is 7,500, 8,000 to only make a couple plays, score a touchdown maybe, and still be optimal, just because they don't have to overcome quite so much in terms of the PPR and stuff as some of the guys who get more volume. So I'm probably going to want to be above the field on guys like Laviska and Demir Bird. So maybe I'll give them a little bit of a projection boost. See what happens. Kyle Pitts, getting to a ton of Kyle Pitts at this price tag, not getting much Tommy Tremble. He falls into that same group of players, not getting, the field's not getting there. Probably just takes 1 touchdown, maybe a little bit more than 1, but maybe a touchdown and another grab for 10 yards or something, but not going to take a ton for him to get there. Not getting too much of these defenses. I probably want to get some against some bad offenses, so give a little bit of a boost to the defenses, and then I'll crunch again. And again, I'm not going to go through my entire process here. I'm just going to tell you what show you kind of the general approach that I take, which is looking at the lineups, making sure they correlate well enough, and then just going through tab by tab. Am I getting 2 exposure levels that I like? I could tell you right here, Panthers 4%. Probably want more than that. I'd give a little boost to Panthers defense projection. Probably okay with these numbers for the kickers. Somewhere in the teens is usually where I try to end up on most slates. On this slate, I think that's probably fine. 40% Kyle Pitts I like. I'd probably give a little bit of a boost to Tommy Tremble to try to get above that 5% number. Ian Thomas, that's not going to change anything there. If I get to 8%, I'm probably fine with it. All right, still not getting much Laviska, Demir Bird. I probably give these guys another half a fantasy point projection boost, something like that. Make sure I'm getting above these numbers for them, just because I do think on FanDuel in particular, getting 0 ownership, I take my chances that one of these guys can hit a home run. Still getting above the field on Terrace Marshall. Maybe I want some more Olamide Zacchaeus. Maybe I'd give a projection boost there. Again, I'm going to have to do some more research before I actually make these decisions. But in general, these are my thought processes. These guys who are super low owned, who are going to be on the field, probably have some shots. I usually go above the field on FanDuel. And same thing here, just looking through, okay, am I getting to as much as I want? Maybe I want a little bit more Tyler Algier than Chuba Hubbard just because of the difference in projected ownership. So then maybe I'd give, Chuba Hubbard. Still, maybe I want more than 12%, bring him up to 8.4, and then I'll bring Algier up to 8.6, something like that, just to, kind of break the tie there in terms of projection. Maybe I'd try to get to a little bit more Algier. Still not getting much. Philip Walker, maybe I give him a little bit more of a boost. Maybe I don't want quite 54% Deontay Foreman, especially if Chuba Hubbard does come back. Then we don't really know how the split is going to look. So maybe I'd actually give a little bit of maybe I'll give a thumbs down to Deontay Foreman, or just lower his projection to 10.8, 10.6, something like that. I'm not going to go through the whole process now. Just kind of want to show you the way I think about it as I'm setting up my lineups. All I'm really caring about is, do these lineups look like they correlate in a way that could win? And am I getting to exposure levels that I like across my set? That's all I'm really looking at. I know that there are different ways to play. Some players try to build, for the underdog, do an underdog onslaught, 4-1 onslaught, something like that. That makes sense too. Those some great players play that way. This is how I build, and it's worked pretty well for me. So anyway, hope you can find some success using this or a similar process tonight. Good luck.